was On a Slow Boat to China, and that song is by Frank Lesser. And I also played Cole Porter's song that's called Easy to Love. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in New York City. Both of my parents professional musicians. My mother was a great singer. She's still a great singer. We play together, we've recorded together, and her name is Sandy Stewart. And she was on a lot of television shows that were kind of variety shows. Perry Como and Mitch Miller, and they were, well-known personalities. And she also toured with Benny Goodman. She sang with the Benny Goodman Orchestra. She was nominated for a Grammy Award when she was in the 60s for one of the first hit songs of John Kander and Fred Ebb. And those are the composers that wrote Cabaret in Chicago and lots of music for Liza Minnelli.
Please,
Yes.
please.
Is it too much?
Sorry, no. Just, I'm sorry. Все понимают, что он сказал, да? Вы все понимаете, да? Что его мать, известная певица, которая работает с Бенни Гудманом. Okay. Just
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Everybody understands.
Great.
That's important.
Okay. My father, his name was Moose Charlap, and he was a composer. He wrote theater music and songs. He was most famous for Peter Pan, which had Mary Martin in it. It was a great star. She played Peter Pan, and he wrote songs that, like I'm Flying, and I've Got a Crow, and I Won't Grow Up. I don't know if you know those songs, but he was one of the last of the great theater composers, really in the tradition of Frank Lesser or earlier Gershwin or Porter, someone like that. So I grew up around all of this music, and I went to a music high school in New York City, the High School for the Performing Arts. If you ever saw the film Fame, it was the Fame High School, and it was an incredible place to go to school because you had kids who were so talented that they were almost professional when they were young, and all kinds of things. Jazz musicians, gospel musicians, classical musicians, people from, it was a public school, so you had people who grew up with money, people who didn't have money, black, white, people from, my best friend was from Latvia. So I got an idea of the world that was a lot broader, I think, than a lot of people would have gotten, especially being in that school. I remember I played with a gospel choir, and here I was growing up in New York City. I wouldn't have gotten a chance to do that if I hadn't gone to a school like that, and really all kinds of things like that. I've been really lucky to play with a lot of my heroes, a lot of the people that I really admire, like the baritone saxophonist Jerry Mulligan. That was one of the first really important gigs that I had. Before that, when I was in my teens, I used to work all over in New York City, and I played for an acting company. It was like Saturday Night Live, It was kind of like that. I was like a silent movie pianist. They would improvise, and I would kind of make up backgrounds. So that was really good too. Anyway, people like Jerry Mulligan and Phil Woods. I was a member of the great Phil Woods, the alto saxophonist. his quintet for about 15 years, and along the way have played with and recorded with people like Jim Hall and Wynton Marsalis and Benny Carter and Clark Terry and Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand and many great musicians. And I've been lucky enough to be around them and learn from all those masters. And at the same time, I've had a trio for the last, wow, it's almost, I think it's getting close to 15 years. It might be getting, it's incredible when I think about that. And that's with Peter Washington, who, if you're here at the concert tonight, he's playing bass, and with Kenny Washington. They're not brothers, they just have the same name. And they're both master musicians. Tonight, Kenny Washington is not here. Rodney Green, who is from a slightly younger generation from Peter and me. I'm 45. I think Rodney is 30, somewhere in that area. Peter's a little older than me. And he's a student of Kenny Washington, and he has his own way of playing too. But I've been really lucky with that group. There was a chemistry that was there right away, and we started to play. The first time we recorded, the first album that we made, I remember I was looking at Kenny Washington as we were playing, and it was like, you know, the chemistry of a friendship or someone that you love. We were dancing partners right away. And I remember I was looking at him while we were playing, and that snare drum, you know, you're playing the drummers go, you know, all that kind of stuff. And the piano player and the drummer are connected like that all the time. The bass player also, but the bass player is solidly makes the framework for everything. The piano player and the drummer were dancing all the time. And I remember thinking, this chemistry is so good. And, you know, it's interesting to me because the very first time we played together is the first album that we made. So I have a photograph of it, and it was there right away. So we went from recording for a smaller label to, we were signed to Blue Note for about 10 years, and we made a number of records for them, and we just started to be able to play at better places and nationally and internationally. So that's in a nutshell my story. I have a lucky life that way. My wife is one of the great jazz pianists in the world. Her name is Rini Rastas. And we also, it was just natural chemistry when we played together. She doesn't, there's never clutter. You know, 2 pianos, that can be an awful lot of notes. 20 fingers, it's too many fingers. If I played with 10 fingers all the time, it would sound terrible. So, but she orchestrates, and she has an incredible gift in her ear that if you drop a needle on a record, whether it's Art Tatum or Stravinsky or whatever it is, instantaneously she knows every single note. She can actually hear it that way. I've never seen anything like it. It's not just a good ear. It's like people who are able to have a photographic memory. So that doesn't make taste, and that doesn't make talent, and that doesn't make musicality. She has all those things. But what it does do is that anything that we play together, there's never clutter. We don't get in each other's way. Now, I would do that just with listening, but I know she really knows if something's going on here. She knows exactly what it is. She's not going to play it. So, anyway, so my life is filled with music. I have 3 children. One of them wants to play the guitar, and he's very serious now. All he cares about is, first it was Michael Jackson, then James Brown, then Prince, then Sly and the Family Stone, and Stevie Wonder, and now he found his alter ego in Jimi Hendrix. And his father is African American, so you know he's figuring out who he is. And he's really talented. And I asked him once, so Dylan, what is it about this music that you love? You know, and that's all, of course it's great music also. And he said, well, he's my stepson. His father is a great drummer, one of the greatest. Billy Drummond is his name. And he said, well, Dad doesn't know about it, and Mom doesn't know about it, and you don't know about it. I thought that was the best answer that you could get from a child. And so I said, carry on. And he's doing great. So anyway, that's that.
Эта история, все вам понятно, наверное, все поняли. Но абсолютно музыкальной семьей, даже жена, которая обладает невероятным слухом и памятью, может любую партитуру, тут же, которую услышала, тут же сыграть на рояле. Это фантастика. У вас какие-то, может, у кого-то специалистов есть вопросы по фортепиано? Может, вы хотели что-то спросить? Мила, если есть у вас какие-то вопросы. Никого никаких вопросов нет. Все, что знают.
Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yes, that's what I asked you.
Yeah.
That's what I asked.
Anything at all? Anything.
То никаких вопросов никого нет, а что вы пришли? Это же не концерт, вы пришли спросить, у вас другой возможности не будет. Как он берет, какие аккорды, какие выбирает темпы, тональность, имеет ли у него значение. Ну?
No. Actually, I studied classical music, but later. That was one of the things in going to the high school for the performing arts. There were my two best friends. Were two girls, one from Korea who could play anything and sight read anything, you know, Bach, Brandenburg, and Cherry, whatever, just like that. But the other was the girl I told you about before, who had just come to America from Latvia. Her name is Eleanor Beinman. She's a great pianist. And what it showed me when I was a freshman in high school was just that, you know, they were really towering piano players. I didn't have that kind of technique. Mine was more coming to music through my ear and the feeling of it. You know, the feeling of basically American music, theater music, jazz, and rock and roll, and all of that. But I studied, of course, classical music later. When I say later, I mean when I was 11, 12, 13. But that's not, for a serious concert pianist, you know, that's very, very late. Well, I play all kinds of things. I mean, there are so many styles in jazz to play. It's not, you know, if you think about jazz, you're thinking about, you might have something as, like stride piano, you know. Something like that. Or, and there's other styles of stride, like Fats Waller. That sort of thing. Bud Powell. That sort of thing. So there's so many different styles within jazz that I would say that I play all kinds of things. But my own way of playing is probably informed most by great modern pianists like Teddy Wilson, Bud Powell, Bill Evans, Tommy Flanagan. A lot of it is bebop, you know. A lot of it is that sort of aesthetic is at the center for me. And also, I guess something that I'm known for doing is playing the songs of the great songwriters like Gershwin, Kern,
Porter.
Rogers, Arlen. You know, when I first started making records, sometimes critics would write, he seems to know all of these songs, and it's unusual. To me, I didn't think it was unusual. I just thought you just play the tunes. You know, that's what you do. But I think that because I was surrounded by so much of that kind of music, that came more naturally to me. And so I guess I'm lucky that not everybody's doing that. So I've got something that I can do.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's what I would do to it.
Student, interesting. What you play in left hand when you play solo.
That's
Depends from which style.
It depends. Now, you know, one of the most important things in jazz is time. Everybody has to be a drummer. So everything that I play is somewhere here, you know. And so there's all these different parts of the beat. Like, you know, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, but you've also got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? So you can hit all of those things. Like here's the and of 1. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Or 1 and of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Right? 1, 2. And so you could even start solos that way. Like here's on the and of 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So it's just learning how to place all of those beats. Now, the left hand, for me, is implying the time all the time. I want to find a better word than implying. Even if it doesn't go like this, even if it just goes, when I played before, I hadn't worked out an arrangement of Easy to Love, but I was just thinking. So that was all in time. That sort of thing. I'm comping for myself, like a guitar player would do. Playing the melody, ba 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 da ba da. Stuff like that. You can do all kinds of things too. I mean, your left hand, it's not just that. You could play a bass line. Now, I wasn't going beat. I'm kind of playing around the beat. Big like, you know, it's a dance, so you're dancing with yourself. But that's, I think, part of the answer. It's such a big question because there's so many different ways to play and to keep the time going. And of course, not everything I do is in time also. But I think at the center of it, that's at least an answer. I think it helps to see jazz piano as comprehensively as you can in terms of history. To know Earl Hines and James P. Johnson and Jelly Roll Morton and Teddy Wilson, to Bud Powell, to Wynton Kelly, to Red Garland, to Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, McCoy Tyner, you know, it's a very wide scope. So there's so many different ways of doing this thing. Anything else?
When we ask you to play about it,
Yes.
because as we all know, we
Okay.
really slow.
Okay. That's another thing too. It's the same thing with a ballad, you know, especially if you're playing slow. Did you remember electronic ping pong that they used to have, you know, the thing that went like this. And that thing would go back and forth, you know. Right? Well, that's what playing time in a ballad is like. You know, it's always doing that. So, no matter what you're doing, if I'm going... that sort of thing. I think I'll play something even more rich. Here's a song by Jimmy McHugh, which is called On the Sunny Side of the Street. Now, I think probably a lot of you know that, might know that song. It's grab your coat and get your hat, leave your worries on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. That's the song. Ella Fitzgerald sings, "Can't you hear the pitter patter?" So, but I think it's a very beautiful song, and you can play it a lot slower, and you can use the harmony too. I think part of playing a ballad too, of course, is your touch. And on this piano, I use the soft pedal too, because I think that it gives some different sounds. Somebody that I learned a lot about that from is Shirley Horn, who is the best pianist for a singer, for herself. You know, she never plays too much. And also a man who was a very dear friend of mine who passed away this year, Sir Richard Rodney Bennett, great composer, and he was a student of Boulez, and he also played great jazz and songs and knew about playing songs, and so he would have a conception sometimes of playing a song that is usually played fast, and he would play it, bring out something else, you know. And you can do that. That's the lyrics too are very important. Even though I'm not a singer, but to me, the lyrics tell you what the whole song is about. Like, there's a song that everybody plays fast, a quarter. It's right. So it's just one of those things, just one of those crazy flings, a trip to the moon on gossamer wings, just one of those things. But you could play that song maybe. Big part of it is touch too, balancing all of that, making the melody sing, shooting it to the back of the house, you know. Anyway, I'm going to play that Sunny Side of the Street. This is kind of how Sir Richard thought of it. I heard him sing it like this, or play it like this.
same New York school of piano playing?
Well, I don't think so. Because the world is so fast today. Because of the internet. Because I don't think there's the same regionalism as there was at a time when you had Jay McShann in the Kansas City scene, and you know, when you really had regionalism, and when there was a New York piano. But New York is, well, I think the best thing that was said about New York was said by the ex-mayor, Mayor Koch. He said something like, I don't know if this is an exact quote, but he said, if you're 1 in a million, there's 10 of you in New York. And I think the thing about New York for musicians, or any artists, is that the competition, not competition, but inspiration, and all these incredible musicians who are really at such a high level, particularly in jazz. It's the center of jazz. It's still where the best musicians in the world, at least in terms of volume, are living. But, you know, I don't have to say, I mean, great talent comes from anywhere. You know, it can come from, you can't believe where it can come from. You know, jazz is, I mean, it's originally black music, but it belongs to everybody. It's a gift. You can't steal a gift. It's a gift. So, but that's what I think about that, I guess.
What do you think? It's different between black musician and white musician, or together, or not?
Well, there's difference. I mean, there are definitely different cultural experiences to the music. But, you know, there are people, there are like white musicians who sound like black musicians. There are black musicians who are drawing on white musicians. And you can hear it now. I do think understanding the aesthetic of swinging and the major players, it doesn't have anything to do with your skin, but it does have to do with your understanding and experience. You know, there's culture in the music. I mean, but that's a very big question, of course, and it's such a big question that there have been books and books and books and books written about it. And it's not just about music, of course. It's about racism. It's about, you know, African Americans and their plight in America. But you know, nobody in this country is a stranger to that, any kind of discrimination or suffering or anything. So it belongs to everybody. And I do think that there are. The main thing is to bring what it is that you are to the music. That's all. I think that's the final thing. And if you can hear it, you can have it. Pretty much, if you can hear it, you can have it.
Right.
But it's about bringing everything that you are. You know, Paul Desmond doesn't sound like Charlie Parker, but he sure plays beautiful, and Bird sure plays beautiful, and you know, nobody listens with their eyes. But I know you're not saying that. You're asking, is there, you know, and of course there's always culture that exists in music from where people come from, and that's a really great thing. I mean, not to be corny, but I have to tell you, just being here, where, you know, Stravinsky and Prokofiev and Tchaikovsky and Mussorgsky and Vladimir Horowitz and Vladimir Ashkenazy, and it's more than you can believe. You know,
Yeah.
this is the music country. So,
Okay, Bill.
but you can hear the Russian soul, you know, and all that.
Can we play something together?
Yes.
Ну, мы так договорились, что он просолировал, а теперь он посмотрит, как он компонирует мне. I don't know. But now we know.
We'll start playing.
That just a moment. I heard you the first that you touch it, piano. Yeah. Second, or just yesterday.
Okay.
На этом, к сожалению, все, потому что он и так устал, приехал, и сейчас еще концерт надо играть. Вот так вот он мог бы и отказаться, но он все-таки нас уважил. И я думаю, что все мы получили удовольствие и узнали его историю, которую я тоже не знал, вам честно скажу, потому что мы встретились до прихода сюда, за 10 минут до того, и я успел сказать ему, что он замечательный музыкант, и что мы достаточно счастливы его получить. Больше ничего. Остальное я слышал то, что он рассказал, мне также было интересно, если вы все это поняли. Ну а теперь дальше. Мы никогда не играли вместе с ним, честное слово, да, абсолютно. Но это выглядело, как будто мы с ним репетировали, верно, все будет все. На самом деле. Это потому что все зависит от того, как ты слышишь. Вот что такое настоящий джаз. It's possible that musicians can play only if you feel each other.
Yes,
That's most important, right?
yes.
Это самое главное, это чувствовать. Это хороший пример. На самом деле, мне приходилось много раз играть с разными музыкантами. Первый раз, и даже с которыми невозможно было на одном языке говорить, например, с японцами, которые не знали английского. Но тем не менее, если ты джазовый музыкант, а не просто музыкант, то все это получается. It's possible only in jazz. Really?
Well, theoretically, to invent it that way, perhaps. Yes.
Of course, as a classical musician, we play very well. For example, on piano, I play violin, we play Mozart concerto or something like that. Yeah. If you're a good piano player, of course, but it's not the same when you play jazz.
Well, you're not composing it. You're not also the composer.
Right.
You know, it's like we're walking down a boardwalk, and we don't see the end of the boardwalk. We walk down the boardwalk and look at different things and have a conversation. It's a conversation.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
No, but he plays so great.